Good hello, welcome to Onion Skin. Now I was thinking to myself, I know, it's time to put a little bit more spice, a bit more flair into a video. And oops, many months just happened and nothing got uploaded. So it's time to go back to basics to get the ball rolling again. It's time for another speed rig, a speed rig of Magnemite. I love Magnemite. How will it turn out? I have no idea. And this is the result. Why do I do this to myself? I hate Magnemite. Here's a drawing of Magnemite, and the rear magnet's in purple, because for some reason, it was really hard to draw. I was happy with the wacky perspective of that front one, but getting a rear one to be compatible with it took a while. And of course, dumb, stupid little riggy projects like this, a whole host of unconventional methods are used. Probably not a good guide if you're looking at this as some kind of tutorial or rigging training. This is simply bodging at its finest. Throwing together very specific methods that will get this particular thing working in a particular way that I am envisioning it to do. Let's set up all of its layers. Here's the pieces I ended up with. A pupil iron head, a single piece for each magnet, and the 3 screws consisting of a shaft, a head, and the cross section in the middle, all of which can be animated separately and together, each of which will get strung up like so. Now to ink them. I think this time around I'll go for a bit of a thinner brush than normal. Drawing freehand, holding control with the pencil sort of gets you this interclosed loop thing so everything stays connected. Then using the white arrow sub-selection to smooth it out a bit so there can be the balance of it still being freehand but still being clean and at least somewhat accurate. And here with the tape we'll join 2 lines together. It's not always clean but easy to tidy. And never neglect the cutter tool underneath the main sub-selection for trimming off all of these overlapping lines. Even after all these years, it is still so satisfying. This shaft one here, which I'll call spiral, in which I've created one line on the grid. Hopefully that will start to make sense soon. Likewise, the cross I also want to be on the grid. Like that. Hopefully that'll be roughly the right size and shape. We shall see. The screw's going to be quite more complicated if they're going to come together the way that I'm thinking. We'll see if that is worth it for something we're trying to make quickly. So for now, move on to colors. Alright, these colors are a bit of a placeholder, but time to get things moving. Because it's a bit of a stupid idea, I'm going to try and make this main body and the magnets all completely automatic, using only Toon Boom's fairly limited generative capability. First, let's relayer things so that the magnets are in front and behind proper. Essentially, the ways to make things tremor, which in itself is essentially just a random number generator with boundaries. There are 2 of them, the older Quake and the newer Shake. From what I understand, the main difference with the Shake is that it's better at easing. You can cause things to slow down and speed up as they shake around, whereas the Quake is a bit more binary. Things will change direction, but they'll do so suddenly. It's for that reason I still tend to gravitate towards the Quake, because I like to use it when things are very chaotic and jittery. Like this. Which is a bit too wild. It's disappearing and appearing because it's also quaking in Z. Forwards and backwards. So now I'll just go BLEH! Oh my good golly, look at this mess. Flash forward. That ended up taking ages. Once again, using conventional methods probably would have been quicker and with a nicer result. But digging my heels in and wanting to get a generative movement, here we got this. The subtle thing that took ages was trying to get the magnets here to sort of trail behind the body a little bit. I don't even know if you can see it happening, but like the middle is like an anchor. The problem was trying to not let things stretch. So here's my little experiment here, where if I pick up this ball here, it'll squash and stretch this a lot. That's how the 2-point constraint works. But inside there is some switches that you can flip to turn off all scaling. So now if I pick it up, see, it'll only rotate to always point at where the circle is. This is what I wanted, and put that in the backpack. There's some really interesting use cases with that I would like to explore later. On this simple tween of just top to bottom, with the spring combined into it, the tip of the arrow will lag behind and then come to a rest. If I keyframe the head, we should get a bit more of a demonstration. So notice now, if I pull that head around, we get the magnets. They want to point back to where we were, where we started. So they sort of fly behind. It's like, it's not perfect, but then they come to rest at the end. It's quite good, isn't it? I did opt for the shake in the end. I tried a Quake. Do you want to see what it looks like? This is the Quake. It's just a little bit less intelligent than the Quake, but I did use a Quake for the pupil. I don't need this mess anymore. This was for an experiment where we like double or triple the effectiveness of the spring. It does get used once here for the eye. The eye pupil assembly goes through this apply peg transformation, which takes the shake and runs it a second time afterwards. And you can see that. And you can see that just looks completely nuts. So by putting a spring in between here, which is wound fairly tight, like normally these have a tension of 7 and I pulled them up to 40, that actually acts as a little bit of a dampener now. So it still has its own shake on top of what was there, but it's a little bit smoother. So it sort of amplifies the 3D effect a little bit without it being too crazy. The pupil, however, completely crazy. It's a Quake, which is even more intense than the shake, and it has a different seed. So it looks more like it's just rattling around inside like a googly eye. At last we come to the screws. I thought this was going to be the hard part. So what I went through before will account for anything. This is going to be ridiculous. I'm going to animate the cross turning all the way around, 360, keyframe before it, and then delete, so then that will get a perfect loop. See how long I want it to be, because then it does a 90-degree turn across 10 frames. So I'll keyframe there, keyframe 1 before it, and then delete the others. So now we have something that will seamlessly loop. Spiral will behave somewhat similar, where I want it to line up with where it started, like that. And the same keyframe removal trick should get it look like it's moving seamlessly along however many times we loop it. I'm going to put another peg on top so everything can be skewed like a screw, and it shouldn't mess up the animation taking place underneath. The shaft will have a light gray fill with its color moved down to the color out sublayer so that we can separate them for masking purposes. So I'll need a line art, a color art, and a cutter. The spiral will be revealed through the color art itself laid under the spiral with the line art on top. There we go. Both of these get combined together. And put into place where they'll be on the drawing. Where will they be? About there, I guess. Now the cross gets animated on this peg, so it will also need another one that just puts it into position. And in between, a mesh warp, which is far too big, and obviously all warp to manipulate it into place. That looks a bit gross, doesn't it? There we go. Less points is definitely more. Still a bit gross in places. Considering you have to manipulate every point, it's a bit tedious to set up. Will that do? Maybe I need to change the shape of the bolt head. Anyway, that's the idea. This bit down here is where it connects in with the main body. So this just needs to be a mask, but with a couple of special properties to it. First, I'll put the mask down on the color art sublayer, set up the whole shaft assembly here like that with a cutter on it, color art removing. And now the interesting bit. That line art also needs to only show up where the shaft is visible. So it'll get laid on top and only shown there, like that. So now everything except that slice bit at the bottom, if that all gets pegged together and placed here like that, not only can it all be swung as a unit, so you notice how that stays still, but it should be capable of receiving one of our dynamic swing contraptions. Plug it in there, pull that out so it goes back on top, in through the top as well, with one more peg here, and this one goes at the top, and then everything goes back into the head. Oh dear. Looks like the base didn't get connected to the head. There we go. Everything's so chaotic, we can't even see the spins and things. Now I'll duplicate this entire assembly 3 times, replacing which parts need to be replaced, replacing the pivots that need to be replaced, until it is all there. Now each one will be its own set of artwork, each one independent, but I want to clone some of the movements, so if I make adjustments to some of the speediness of these screws, it will affect all 3 of them. That will be done by going to get one, say this one here, and rather than a duplicate, it's just a simple copy paste. So now if I give this a paste cycle, or we tell it to cycle say 20 times, that should be seamless and ongoing for all of them. Okay, that's enough. The jiggle is functional. Despite the enormous amount of work that it took to figure out how to have trailing elements, jiggling around it is barely even noticeable. Those placeholder colors were getting too much. Had to do some compositing. That in itself ended up taking another 2 hours, where I could have just, colored it by hand. Had to do a whole bunch of node-based compositing. Also, to actually show off the swayiness of the limbs, here's a more swaying style animation rather than a jiggle. If you want to see how this compositing phase was done, please subscribe. I'll put that up in a couple of weeks. This was very exhausting. Draw it in a more simple way. Why do I keep over-engineering things like this? Bye! Thank you everyone for your support and patience during my absence. Very suddenly, many months just go by. It's been a wild year, hasn't it? I ended up having to take on a bunch of full-time work to stay afloat. It ended up being a lot more difficult than I thought it would be to try and balance channel content on the side. I should have stated a lot more formally that I would be taking a break, but every single week it was like, no, I'm going to find enough time to make a video now, and then it just never really happened. The job itself finished, and then I still struggle to find more time, and I think that is just an excuse. It really was more about just making the time. And a lot of the year really did just turn into a strange blur. I'm sure that was the case for many. I'm glad to be doing these again. I hope I'll be able to keep it up. Remember to make what you love, but take plenty of rest, get enough sleep. Your health is more important.